everyone, and welcome back to the Analyst Vajiram and Ravi, dated 21st of February. Today you will learn about four very important current affair articles from UPSC point of view featured in the Hindu and Indian Express. Our first topic entails study of Article 142 of Indian Constitution, which empowered the Supreme Court recently to quash the results of Chandigarh mayor election. In the second article, we will read about nanoplastic pollution as analyzed by a recent study of Columbia University. Then we will evaluate the status of Panchayats as self-governing institutions in India. And finally, we will wind up the discussion by reading about a recently announced initiative by WHO regarding promotion of digital health. This is the Global Initiative on Digital Health. So let's get started. Now, a hot topic which has been taking rounds of current affairs in the last few days has been the mayor elections conducted in Chandigarh. So what has happened? Let me tell you the context in detail. So on 30th of January, the elections were held, and then soon after, a CCTV footage was leaked where the returning officer, as you can see, was found to be tampering with about 8 ballot papers. This actually disadvantaged the AAP candidate and eventually leading to the victory of the BJP candidate. So overall, this was considered to be one among the tampering that was done with the election process. Now, Supreme Court has taken this matter into its own hand, into its own cognizance. But which article of the Constitution provides the power to Supreme Court to do so? This is a very exclusive, extraordinary, discretionary power given by the Constitution to the Supreme Court under Article 142. So, 142 gives discretionary power to the Supreme Court to provide complete justice whenever it is necessary. It is more often required when there are not sufficient laws and statutes existing in the country to deliver this kind of justice. This was seen in the case of, let's say, cleaning of the Taj Mahal, or banning the alcohols in the highway, or even the Ram Janmabhoomi dispute. In many instances, it was seen that the Supreme Court exercised Article 142 to take up any matter of the country in order to deliver complete justice in the nation. This can be for any cause or for any matter pending before it, and it is enforceable throughout the territory of India. This is an important point which you need to remember for Article 142. I hope you've understood the basics of it. Now let's see what have been some of the noticeable uses of Article 142. There have been many instances. It is becoming very famous to be used these days, but there has to be some limitation, because as you can see that Supreme Court can exercise its power under Article 142 in almost every domain, in almost every sphere. But there has to be certain boundary to it, and that was imposed for the first time by Prem Chand Garg case of 1962, when for the first time it was defined that the scope should be consistent with the fundamental right, and not just the fundamental right, but any statutes or any regulations which are going on within the territory of India. So, the Article 142, yes, can be exercised in any domain, but there are certain restrictions of statutes, restrictions of constitutional provisions. Then the Union Carbide Corporation versus Union of India case, where Supreme Court showed brilliance of judicial activism by rightfully compensating the victims of Bhopal gas tragedy. So about $470 million were ordered to be paid back in compensation to the victims, and it was applauded worldwide. And here what Supreme Court did, it placed itself in a position above the parliamentary laws, because there was no parliamentary statute regarding it existing at that time. And then Supreme Court says that I will take up this work and I will provide them due compensation. So this was a case of judicial activism, but at the same time, this was a case where Supreme Court put itself above the existing parliamentary laws and statutes. Then there was Siddiqui versus Mahant Suresh Das case. This is also known as the famous Ayodhya land case or Ram Janmabhoomi case. So in this particular one, the disputed Ram Janmabhoomi was handed over to a trust, and this was also done by Supreme Court under the cognizance of Article 142. So these were some of the notable examples which you can also use in your mains answers if they come in UPSC exam. Now, Can you solve this particular UPSC PYQ with the help of information we have just read? So we read that with reference to Constitution of India, prohibitions or limitations or provisions contained in ordinary laws cannot act as prohibitions or limitations on the constitutional powers under Article 142. It could mean to which of the following. It has been quite self-explanatory itself, but now that you know that there has been an instance, the incident of Bhopal gas tragedy, where Supreme Court has actually moved up and above the parliamentary laws. So here the correct answer is that Supreme Court of India is not constrained in the exercise of its power under Article 142 by the laws made by the parliament. So this is the correct answer. So I hope you got this conceptual clarity. Now, let's talk about its evaluation and its way forward. So first of all, what are the criticism? We know there are multiple benefits to it. It provides justice to the people, welfare to the people, but then there are certain criticism associated with it as well. See, first of all is ambiguity in the definition. So there is no complete definition of the complete justice world that gives the power to Supreme Court to exercise this discretion. So first of all, this interpretation is very subjective and it varies from case to case. So first of all is the ambiguity over its definition. Now when there is ambiguity, there is also a chance that there will be wide discretion available with the Supreme Court. So this was seen in the case of R.S. Nayak versus A.R. Antole. In this case, it was seen that Supreme Court, using the Article 142, transferred cases from special judges to the High Court, and this cannot be challenged as well. Why? Because judiciary cannot be held accountable for its action, unlike legislature and executive, because judiciary can always have checks and balances on both these two wings of governance. But what about judiciary? So it was seen in the case of Vinay Chandra Mishra case, where disciplinary action was taken on an advocate. Now this kind of thing is under the Advocate Act, is under the jurisdiction of Bar Council of India and not under the jurisdiction of Supreme Court. Supreme Court still exercised it, and who can blame Supreme Court for it? Because Supreme Court cannot be held accountable for actions to a large extent. Then, it also violates the grounds of separation of power. Separation of power, a basic principle which is also present in the basic structure of Indian Constitution, says that legislature, executive and judiciary should work independently from each other. But if Supreme Court has the power to exercise or to create any laws or statutes or make any orders in order to fulfill complete justice under this particular article, then is it not trying to impinge the jurisdiction of legislature and executives which are responsible for lawmaking? Yes, it is. In fact, it was seen in the case of the cancellation of the coal block allocation. So all the coal blocks allocated from 1993 were deemed to be cancelled after 2014 under the order of Supreme Courts, which was made under the Article 142. So these are some of the criticism that are for this Article 142. So then what can we do? How can we empower the Supreme Court but at the same time make sure that separation of power is also held intact? So for this, first of all, we need to have very strict guidelines, as can be seen in 2006 Supreme Court judgment of State of Karnataka versus Uma Devi, where it was clarified that complete justice means justice according to law, in cognizance with the statutes running in the country, regulations and the constitutional provision, and not on the basis of sympathy, because it can also have certain economic implications. So let's say, so for example, Supreme Court invalidated or prohibited the selling of liquor on the highways. Now definitely it is good for humanitarian causes, for road safeties, etc. But it took toll on the people who were living their lives on the basis of these liquor shops. So it had drastic economic impact, and it can also somewhere lead to judicial overreach. So we also need to have check and balance on Supreme Court's exercise of Article 142 so that the judicial activism does not account to judicial overreach. And therefore, when the constitutional makers made this provision, they made it an exceptional provision, meaning it can only be exercised in some of the unique and exceptional circumstances and not everywhere. So that should also be taken into consideration, that it should be exercised only as an exceptional provision. So this was our analysis on Article 142. We will talk about the next topic. This is a very interesting one. This is about the nanoplastic pollution. You must have heard about the plastic pollution, but here we will read what are nanoplastics and what are their associated impacts on environment, on lives, on people, on their health. So what is the context? That recently Columbia University, a very prestigious university from New York, has conducted a study on the presence of nanoplastics in various products like water bottles. It has also revealed that a single water bottle can contain up to 1 to 3 lakh of plastic particles, and about 90% of these plastic particles are your nanoparticles. So therefore we have to read about nanoparticles in detail. So first of all, when I talk about nano, what is this metric? This metric, if we translate it into meters, is actually 10 raised to power minus 9 meters. What is a microplastic, or what is a micrometer? It is 10 raised to minus 6 meters. Now, a nanoplastic is the one which has its size length from 1 micrometer to 1 nanometer. This is the size in which the nanoscale operates. Now, nanoplastics generated because of the degradation of plastics at nanoscale, very natural. But then what is the issue? See, the smaller the size, the bigger the risk, because the higher the penetrability ability or the penetration ability of a toxin inside the body, inside any organism or inside the ecosystem in large. So if you see in the particular case of nanoplastic pollution, because it has got very small size, very high penetration capacity, it can very easily enter inside your brain, lung, arteries, and even the smallest of the cells because of its size, and therefore it has to be dealt in detail. Now when we talk about the sources which causes nanoplastic pollution, let me also tell you what is nanoplastic pollution in broader detail. So the accumulation of nanoplastics in undesirable amount which causes bad or ill effects on the environment and on the health of the biology, then this is referred to as the nanoplastic pollution. What are the sources? It comes from multiple sources. There can be natural sources and there can be intentional manufacturing sources as well. The natural would require or would mean that there is natural degradation of the existing plastics. That is maybe because of the mechanical aberration. So that is the mechanical one, or maybe because of hydrolysis, or maybe the chemical reaction or chemical reacting on certain plastics and degrading them at nanoscale. So very natural. This is the first source. The second source is when you intentionally create or induce nanoscale plastics in some of the lifestyle products or let's say cosmetic products. For example, this facial scrub, you can see it has got multiple minuscule microscale microbeads, and these microbeads further degrades into nanobeads. Now while it is easier for us to filter out the microbeads, but it is not very easy to filter out the nanobeads, and therefore it further causes bioaccumulation in the larger organism, especially when it enters into marine ecosystem. So this is about the intentional creation or the intentional source of nanoplastics. Now when we are talking about the nanoplastic pollution, how does it affect multiple ecosystems? First we'll talk about the marine ecosystem, because according to a report of natural biologist in 2018, it revealed that about 3 billion tons of nanoplastic enters into the ocean ecosystem every single day. This is the amount of nanoplastic entering into marine ecosystem, and because it is so small in size, it very easily impacts the lower trophic level, which means the planktons and the algae. It gets deposited in them. Now when these are eaten by the larger species, for example fish, and when they are eaten by the more larger fishes like whales and sharks, etc., it gets bioaccumulated, leading to carcinogenous symptoms in the marine ecosystem. It also causes plastic rust in the rocks and the bedrocks, etc., of the marine ecosystem. It also hampers the growth of corals and other algae. So overall, it also impedes the growth of marine ecosystem, which is also one of the foremost sources of food for humans. So therefore, it enters food chain as well. Next is its impact on terrestrial ecosystem. So here you can see that it can also enter the soil, which can lead to loss of soil fertility, leading to soil degradation. Then it can also be uptaken by the plants, which can also impact the plant's health. So it also impacts plant health. It can also reach further down, and then it can also cause groundwater pollution. So can you see there are multiple impacts on marine and terrestrial ecosystem. It majorly comes from the consumer products like lifestyle products, the toothpaste, the face washes, the cosmetics that we use, all of them are major contributors of nanoparticles or nanoplastics into these ecosystems. Now, once we have read this, what are the challenges with respect to nanoplastic pollution? Now, we read that it not only degrades the marine ecosystem but also the terrestrial ecosystem, the aquatic ecosystem, and then we can also conclude that the aerial ecosystem. Once, which is all of these also contribute, the plants, the soil, and the fishes, they also contribute as our food. So then it also enters into our food chain. The moment it enters into our food chain, it enters into a human body. The moment it enters into a human body, it has the ability to penetrate inside the deepest of cells, smallest of cells, which can bring out an inflammatory response due to the action of immune system of the body. This inflammation can rise up. This inflammation can also lead to multiplication of cells, which you know as cancers. You guessed it right. So it can have inflammatory responses from the body. It can also build cancers in human body. So that is one among the human health implications of nanoplastic. Second, it has also got implications in longer run because it is non-degradable in its core. It is a plastic, and therefore it can have long-term contamination. This can lead to bioaccumulation. This leads to persistent pollution. And then it can also lead to biodiversity loss, especially for the fragile and vulnerable species, especially the marine species. For example, the krills, the tuna fishes, the corals, all of them can die out, can become extinct because of over accumulation of nanoplastics in them. Then there are also research challenges associated. There is no available comprehensive study. Colombia is a pioneer in the same, but there is no comprehensive study available. Why? Because the studies is very difficult. Nanoparticles, nanoplastics are so small that it's very difficult to understand, to track its source rightfully, to understand its distribution and dispersal rightfully, and all of them eventually makes it very difficult to study this particular kind of pollution. So studies, R&D is also not very much available. Therefore, solutions are also not available to us at the time. Now, what can we do about it? There are multiple way forwards. It has to be a multi-pronged approach because we have to tackle it on multiple levels. So first of all, we need a right regulatory environment for this. So for this, we need ban on intentional plastics. I've already classified plastics into two. One that is naturally degraded, and second, which is intentionally created. So the intentional ones, especially those which are not even required. For example, you do not require microbeads in your scrubs or your toothpaste, etc. Then why to use it unnecessary and then cause a toll on the fishes? So therefore, we need to ban or at least have very, very strict regulations on intentional plastics. A good example here is Taiwan's microbead ban. They have banned microplastics in their cosmetic and daily products completely, which also leads to elimination of nanoplastics. Then also encouraging the industries by providing them certain certificates. For example, certificate on the a certificate which says that this product is nanoplastic free. You can provide them that. You can also provide them some of the incentive tax benefits if they are producing something which is not having microplastics or nanoplastics in them. Then about the waste management, the problem is if we are not disposing the waste rightfully, then it gets degraded at nanoscale, creating nanoplastics. So we need to have proper waste disposal in the first place. For that, first of all is waste collection. The example of Indore could be a good case study. Second, we need advanced treatment technologies as well. The treatment of this waste so that it doesn't get degraded further is also very, very important. So all of these situations, all of these management practices will lead to lessening of the amount of plastic that is present in the ecosystem, and therefore lessening the amount of degraded nanoplastic. Then how about rethinking plastics altogether? So we also need to bring innovations in the plastic. Can we create biodegradable plastic so that they do not get degraded at that level that creates a menace? Second, can we produce filtration system which works at nanoscale so that we can filter out the nanoplastics and microplastics as well? So such innovations are required. Now we would also require community engagement. So for example, in the case of waste management, we can perform community led activities like plogging while you're walking or while you're jogging, you also try collect the plastics. This is very prevalent in the Western nations, especially in Scandinavian nations. So plogging could be one thing. Second is Project Aware. Project Aware is a global non-profit organization which is responsible for creating some local action plans. Specifically, what it does is it allows the scuba divers to go inside the water and collect the plastic waste. So it's like cleaning the deep seas. So this is about community engagement. We can harness the social energy. And finally, we want international cooperation from the people, from the government, from the organizations. So one such example is Global Partnership on Marine Litter. So this partnership is also created in order to make our ecosystem rid of the marine litter. Now, marine litter is also one of the facts which has created the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, GPGP. So all of this can be done in order to deal with this menace called nanoplastic pollution. Now, can you try out this question for me? This is a mains question. Discuss the challenges and the potential solutions associated with the nanoplastic pollution, considering its impact on marine ecosystem, terrestrial environment, and human health. To guide you through it, you have to focus on three aspects, three demands of the question. You have to talk about the challenges, the potential solutions you have to give, and before that you have to write its impact on three domains: the marine ecosystem, the terrestrial ecosystem, and the human health. I hope this discussion will help you solve this question very easily. Now, our third topic for the day is an evaluation of the Panchayats as the self-governing institutions. So in this one, we will assess whether Panchayats, which are responsible for providing grassroots democracy, are they really self-governing themselves? Are they self-reliant or not? So this has been discussed in this particular editorial, and which assess the performance of local bodies in India. This is a very important topic for UPSC. You can see the reference of syllabus over here. Now, if I talk about the governance structure in India, it is a three-tiered governance structure. So we have got top tier center, then we have got state level governance, and then we have got the grassroots governance, which is the most accessible to you and me. So this facilitates the grassroots democracy, and this has been made in both the realms of India, rural India and urban India. In rural India, it is empowered by the Panchayati Raj, and in urban India it is empowered by the municipalities. Now, both of them have been constitutionalized in the year 1992. It doesn't mean that before 1992 they were not existing, but they were not a compulsory provision before that. Once they have been constitutionalized, they were made compulsory provisions. So the Panchayati Raj was made a compulsory provision, or it was constitutionalized by the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, and municipality under 74th Constitutional Amendment Act 1992 again. Panchayati Raj belongs to Part 9 of Indian Constitution. Municipality belongs to Part 9A of Indian Constitution. Then Panchayati Raj belongs to Schedule 11 and municipality belongs to Schedule 12. These are very, very basic things which is required for prelims. So I have given an overview of this. Now we are particularly going to talk about the grassroots democracy and specifically about the performance of Panchayati Raj, especially the fiscal discipline of Panchayati Raj. So once we have discussed the structure, what are the challenges which the author of the editorial is talking about? So first of all, he shows concern about the status of devolution, the fiscal devolution. So if we talk about the fiscal devolution in the terms of Panchayati Raj, it is given in two forms. So Panchayati Raj, local self-government bodies in rural areas, gets its fund revenues from two sources. Once, its own sources, own OSR or self-created sources or revenues, and second is the grants it gets from both the center and the state. Now the issue over here is that they are overtly dependent on the grants that they get from center and state. It has been said by a government report only that less than 1% of the total revenue generated by the Panchayati Raj are generated by the taxes. So that the taxes that they collect. So when you talk about the OSR or the revenues, the self-earning revenues of Panchayati Raj, you see that they can be broadly divided into tax sources and the non-tax sources. So your tax sources would include collecting the property taxes or levying taxes on services, for example, water supply or sanitation, and non-tax sources would involve services, for example, some of these sales, or for example, you are renting out something, renting out a shop or something. So these are the non-tax revenue, and less than 1% of it has been collected from the tax sources, which means when you talk about the financial devolution, the one which wins in the last is the OSR, or the revenues that they create for themselves or they generate for themselves. What are the reasons behind this? First of all, they are negligent. The state governments are negligent for it. And second, that there was a drastic increase in the allocation of the resources by Central Finance Commission. So the 10th Finance Commission devolved only about 4,000 crore rupees to the local self-government, but then it drastically shot up, and in 15th Finance Commission you can see the devolution up to 2.8 lakh crore rupees. So this says that probably they do not require, even in fact the taxes that they collect will also, the taxes that overall local self-government bodies will collect in India will also surmount to somewhere about 1 crore rupees. So they say that there is no need, there is no much need to create our own revenues. Instead we can completely rely on grants from the center, because anyway they are giving a lot of money. But the problem is the division, the distribution, or the equity with which it is distributed among multiple states. And this often leads to the second crisis, which is the inadequate grants from center and state that is given to the local self-government. What will this do? This will finally impinge upon the developmental parameters of the Panchayati Raj, or of the rural areas, specifically because we are here dealing about the rural areas, so particularly about the grams or the rural areas of India. Now, this leads us to the second challenge, which is the ineffective devolution of the powers. The powers and the authorities which are accorded to the local self-government are at the hand of state governments. Why? Because local self-governance is a state subject. So, it also varies according to the mercy and the discretion of the state. Because of which, many of the powers, for example, the use of the power and authority over the construction, creation and operation of the non-conventional sources of energy, etc. Such powers are not equally divided, equally devolved in all or the local self-government across the country. This is one of the challenge. Then we also have infrastructural challenge. Now, if you do not have adequate power authority, adequate resources, then this will lead to depletion and even depreciation of the basic of infrastructures. In many of the Gram Sabhas, it can be seen that the Gram Sabhas are getting conducted in the premises of schools, shared premises of schools and colleges itself, because they do not have their own buildings. Some of them who are having the buildings do not have other infra, for example, basic toilets or basic drinking water and sanitation facilities. That is the level of deprivation going on in terms of infrastructure in our local self-governance. So then what can we do about it? Clearly, we need to enhance the own source of revenue. This can be done by making some effort. The Gram Sabha, the local body, should take some efforts in order to collect the taxes. These taxes would include collection and proper assessment of the property taxes and of some of the service charges, charges from water, charges from sanitation, etc. They can also do it by some other innovative ideas. For example, what if they create ecotourism in their villages? What if they create rural tourism in their villages and collect revenues from there? So this can also be done. They can also try to generate the energy from the non-conventional sources. For example, they can create agro wind farms or agro solar farms. That can also be a very good idea. Then second would be utilization of the grants and the fund. Even if you have the sources, even if you have the revenue with you, if you're not utilizing it properly, it will lead to you not having even basic infrastructure. So therefore, it should not be feeding some of the high powered pockets of the rural areas or of the local urban areas, but it should be utilized to build infrastructure, give people the internet, give people proper service delivery, so that efficient schemes like Swamitva, they can see the light of the day in these rural areas. And then we need to have promotion of revenue generation activities. I've already told you, it could be because of due to some ecotourism, etc. And then you also need to foster the public participation and accountability, bring in together the people when you are talking about budget allocation, so that they feel more inclusive, they feel more included, and this can lead to financial transparency. This can lead to financial transparency, and this will eventually lead to strengthening of the grassroots of the country. And this was what is taught in this particular editorial. And then finally, we will learn about the Global Initiative on Digital Health. So what is the context? That WHO and G20 India Presidency has announced a new global initiative on digital health. So first and foremost, when we are talking about an initiative on digital health, which is seemingly a new word, what do we mean by digital health in the first place? So digital health is where you are trying to improve the healthcare or the standards of healthcare by incorporating technology or by incorporating digital media. So this is what we mean by digital health. Basically, it is an interdisciplinary profile where you're trying to bring together the healthcare along with technology. So let's say, for example, I want to bring healthcare for the COVID patients. And at the same time, I want to make it more efficient by incorporating technology. So at the intersection, I will be creating a COVID portal that has been done in India. And then you can also see some of the other examples. For example, Rapid Pro that has been created by WHO. You also have got Family Connect. So these are some of the modes and means through which digital health can come to the people. So this is a WHO managed network or network of networks that will promote the equitable access to digital health, because whenever the word digital gets attached to something like health, which should be made available to all, it will get certain constraints in the sense, are you able to afford the internet or the digital infrastructure, or are you digitally literate? So these are some of the constraints which are there if you want to deliver the digital health. So therefore, because of the immense significances, it helps us to manage some of the issues. First of all, it helps us to manage the low digital literacy, especially in the African nations, South Asian regions, then the low internet penetration. Then it also helps us to provide healthcare in the last rungs, especially in the low and middle income countries, sub-Saharan Africa, etc. So it helps us in providing accessibility of health to everyone. Second, it also helps us in data management. So one would be able to take up the entire record, life record or the health record of a particular person. This will help them to bring them better medicines or better curative practices. Now that is why data management, it ensures data management. It also somehow ensures data security, data profiling. So these are some of the significances of what? Of providing digital health. And therefore, the focus of WHO today is to provide or to make the digital health accessible to everyone. Now, if you talk about the main aims, first of all, it is to align the efforts of the global strategy of WHO on digital health. The targeted years are from 2020 to 2025. Meanwhile, it will try to support quality assured technical assistance to develop and strengthen standards based and interoperable systems aligned to global best practices, norms, and standards. And then finally, it will help us to facilitate the deliberate use of quality assured digital transformation tools. So these are some of the aims which will be done via these four pillars. So the four important pillars of this digital health initiative is, first of all, to have a country tracker in every country to understand their own important needs. So first of all, we will be tracking specific needs of the country. We will be tracking the specific resources available in the country and what is required for the country. Second, we will give them, deploy some of the transformative toolboxes so as to generate the platforms for providing digital health, for providing digital connectivity, and for providing digital literacy. And then finally, convening and knowledge exchange among multiple countries so that we can learn from each other's best practice. So all of this comprehensively will entail this global initiative on digital health. So this was all about today's discussion, and all the very best until we meet again.